Well, this took a little bit of time today, and still not right, but um, anyway, we're live, and I'm Kat. I am an admin on a Facebook page, and I was asked by some of my people if I would come over here and do a live over here on YouTube, and so I have a following of over 1.5 million roughly between two pages on Facebook, The War at Home, If Only Someone Knew, and Guardian's War Cry, where I openly speak about coercive controlling relationships and how we can recognize them, how we can live in them, how we can get away from them, and just bring awareness into the world. Um, anyway, my name is Kat, and I'm here today. I thought I would talk about personal uh, independence in finding our own space in that independence and in hi Janine, it's good to see you, sweetie. And finding our own space and our own ways of being able to communicate when we come out of these relationships that keep us strapped down and away from being our own self. And so that's my hope, is that we can drive some awareness so people can see what it really looks like, instead of what you think it is. And so I usually have a little saying, which I want to say today on Independence Day, which is unlike, unlike a drop of water, loses its which loses. Man, I got frustrated at the very beginning of this in even coming live, and then it started to come, and then it wouldn't. So bear with me. I'm going to jumble a little bit because this is all new to me. Anyway, came across a quote this week. Unlike a drop of water, which loses its identity when it joins the ocean, man does not lose his being in a society in which he lives. Man's life is independent. He is born not in development of society alone, but for the development of his self. And that's by B.R. Ambedkar. And I think about that today, in that while we may be in these relationships that are coercively controlling and they may be hard for us to work in, we still are in community as well, which is one of the reasons why I speak, is because when I figured out what this was that I had lived in when I grew up, and then in relationship and in work relationships and stuff, I thought, why aren't people talking about this so that there's not the suffering that keeps going on, and children are being brought up in these kinds of homes. And so, I think as a society, we need to know what it is. And then I think as an individual, we need to know what it is that makes us self. It's part of that critical thinking. Came across another saying, which is by Stephen Covey, which says every human has four endowments: self-awareness, conscience, and independent will and creative imagination. These gifts, they give us the ultimate human freedom, the power to choose, to respond, and to change. And my hope is that in coming and talking about these things that we keep secret and we don't talk about, is that people can understand where their power is in these relationships. The power to choose to be in that relationship or to not be in that relationship, to react in that relationship or respond, and to change where we are in those endeavors. And I think that it's important to think about on Independence Day, um, where you sit as a person in these troubled times, if you want to get into the uh, political unrest that we have here in the United States, it's getting to know who we are and how we feel about things that we don't talk about openly. And when we look at coercive control, it can be found in governments all the way down into our homes. And I think that we should be aware of what it is so that we can understand what it is and what it's trying to drive. Because if we understand what it's trying to drive, then we can make our decisions based on how this feels to us. I think of the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg when she says, "My mother told me to be a lady." And for her, that meant be your own person, be independent. And I think to me, as a woman, that's a nice voice for me to be able to have, is to have what it means to be me. And so, I think of um, the words of what else? I'm sorry, I'm a little frustrated. Um, what is her name? Harriet Tubman. And Harriet Tubman um, said there was one of two things I had right to that I have a right to: liberty or death. If I could not have one, I would take the other. For no man should take me alive. I should fight for liberty as long as my strength lasted. And I think that it's when you're in these relationships as a child, you just have to go along with what it is that's going along. You don't have much of a say, which is why I think we have to talk about it, is so that we can get away from that thought process. I remember talking with my dad and him saying that he made sure that when he wanted to correct one of us children, that he didn't want to do it when he was angry because he felt like that was wrong. And he grew up with songs like "Hit Her Again, Pa, Hit Her Again." And he knew that that wasn't right, and he didn't want to be that person. And then I think that, um, when we look at personal freedoms, I think about my mom and her living in Colorado and growing up in Colorado as a young woman in the 40s. And she was white and would go across town uh, to a Black community, and they would sing church together, and that community would come over to her area and they would sing. So she got to know the Black community really well. And um, that gave her an understanding about a different culture than what she had been growing up in. And she ended up working with the homeless and giving them socks and making sure that they were fed and food. So, my family has been about giving, but we also had abuse in the home. My mother left my father when I was young. And so I think that we have to think about these things in relationship to our independence, our coming away from what we have grown up into, where we have been, so that we can come into who we are. And we aren't taught this. I wish people were taught this. People think that this idea of self-care is selfish, and it is not. It is something that we need to have in order a good sense of self and how we feel about things. I believe in order to understand what love is. And if you think about the words of Dick Van Dyke, he says, love is this feeling of caring about the life and welfare of uh, another person as much as you care about yourself. So if you're caring about yourself, not enough, but you're caring about others more, then you got to bring that up a little bit so that you can level out that playing field. And I think you have to bring it up just a little bit more because you can't serve from an empty cup. But that's for a different day. This idea about who we are and the independence that we have and the liberties that we have, and we may be being challenged with what those are depending on our own thought processes. But I think we have to look at our own thought processes in the shape of community to understand what coercive control does in our communities and what it does to people in their homes. And so I think of the words of Harriet Truman again when she says, "If you hear the dogs, keep going. If you see the torches in the woods, keep going. If shouting after you, keep going. Don't ever stop. Keep going. If you want a taste of freedom, keep going." Harriet Truman. And I think of those words in relationship to being from a family that had coercive controlling aspects to it, and them yelling and telling me to sit down, shut up, and don't cause a scene because I was calling out things that were happening that I didn't believe in. So we have to keep going. We have to keep making those adjustments into who we want to be. Do we want to be a person in a relationship that is only feeding the person that we are with, or feeding our parent or our child, and not feeding ourselves with that life sustaining kind of goodness that we need in order to stand on our own? I hope that gives you guys some thoughts about what I was thinking about for independence. It's a little off because it's my first time being live on the YouTube channel, and I thought I was on, and then I wasn't, and then I came back, and it's kind of messy your first time on these kinds of things. But I think that it's important for us to talk about coercive control, what it looks like, and coercive control is the underpinning of all abuse. So if we think about that quote alone, then in order for us to be able to move in this world, we need to be able to identify what coercive control is. And coercive control isn't like the sign with abusers that come up and says, "I'm an abuser and I'm going to abuse you," because if it did, people that were in those relationships wouldn't get involved. Coercive control comes in and they tell you how wonderful you are, and they connect with you in ways much like a con is done. And if you're not savvy to understand what it is, then you get involved in it. If there is a trauma bond that is made, which is hard for people to break from. And so we have to learn to be independent of them. We have to learn, like I was talking about Dick Van Dyke, we have to learn to love ourselves enough to be able to say, no, I'm not doing this. I'm not betraying who I am so that you can get your needs met and I don't have my needs met as well. That's my job, is to make sure that my needs are met. And so, in a long roundabout way, I want you to have the independence that we all deserve. I want you to have the personal strength that, like Ruth Bader Ginsburg talked about, in the fact, there's a little story about her that I adored, which was she would make the school would call her to tell her to go pick up her child, and she would tell them, "You can call my husband; he can pick him up too." And her husband knew this and would go and pick up the child as well. It was a balance of power between the two, and she pushed up against that. If you look at Betty White, she pushed up against that power of being able to speak in a way that was only boys spoke with, only men spoke that way, not in mixed companies back in the 50s. And she wore a pretty frilly dress because she wanted to break that barrier that said this is who she is. And we look at men, and I think about Terry Crews coming out and saying he had been abused, and he's this big man who came out in his community and said, "This has happened to me as a man," and cried about it. And we have to allow boys to cry, and we have to allow girls to speak up when things are abusive. We have to talk about it. So I hope you join us on this channel, or you come over to the Facebook channel and join us there. I hope you've enjoyed this little chat. I usually do them once a week. And just know that you are loved, know that you are cared for, and think about your personal independence. And are you saying what you really think? Go into your heart and kind of feel it. Get by yourself and get an idea of your intuition. Is this really who I am? And that that liberty that allows you to speak and to be who you are intended to be. I see that sparkle in your eye, and I hope that it glistens tonight in the night sky as the fireworks go off. Take care. Have a good week. We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.